And welcome back to Face the Nation. With the 2016 campaign now off and running, with Hillary Clinton getting in the race officially today. Marco Rubio will announce later this week. We're going to start with the chairman of the Republican Party now, Reince Priebus. Thank you very much for coming.
Congratulations, Bob.
Well, thank you so much. You know, we showed a little clip of the latest Republican ad, and you went right after Hillary Clinton even before she announced. Is there a concern that you might, you know, that it might backfire here and make her, you know, people sympathetic to her with all this starting so soon?
No, I don't think so. I mean, she's trying to portray this air of inevitability. And I think if you look at the facts of the case, which is where I really would like to stay as chairman of the party, you know, if you look at the facts of the scandal that surrounds her, you look at the facts of the recent polling where a majority of people in battleground states say that she's untrustworthy. When you look at the fact that she has 100% name ID.
Is there a majority or
majority of the people polled in Colorado, Virginia, Iowa, Florida said that she's untrustworthy. When you take the fact that she has 100% name ID. This is an important fact for people to understand. She has pure saturation, but yet she's losing to a number of our candidates in those battleground states that have a third of her name ID. So if you were me and you were chairman of the national party and you had someone on the ticket that would unite your party, would help you raise a lot of money and help you recruit a ton of volunteers, you'd want nothing more than Hillary Clinton to be on the other side.
Let's talk about some of the things. You heard, and we were talking this morning about this, the Clinton Foundation and so forth, and taking contributions from foreign countries like Saudi Arabia. Is that a legitimate criticism of her?
Well, of course it is, and now she's going to be under even more scrutiny about where she got the money from, how did she, if she used her position as Secretary of State, some of which is why these emails are so important and why 60% of Americans are saying that what she did in regard to her emails is inappropriate. These are the things we want to know. And in fact, I have a hard drive for you, Bob. It's at stophillary.org, and it's the Clinton email files, a little bit of fun. But we have to do a lot of things to point out the fact that the facts of the case are such that Hillary Clinton is, quite frankly, someone that the American people can't trust. And so we're going to stick to the facts, and the facts are people have a lot of questions about who she was on planes with, who she was talking to, and how perhaps she used her position as Secretary of State to get money into the Clinton Global
Initiative. You know, I was sitting
Initiative.
here as I was listening to your answer about the contributions from Saudi Arabia. They do go to a foundation. She can't use that money personally, but it also occurs to me a lot of your candidates, and the Democrats as well, are going to be taking campaign contributions that we're never going to know where they come from. Right, because now you can give these unbelievable amounts of money without any accounting of where the money comes from.
But the difference is, no matter all those other entities, super PACs, parties, individual candidates, they can't take money from kings of Saudi Arabia and Morocco and Oman and Yemen, and that's what Hillary Clinton did. And so she's going to have to account for this money. And she can't have it both ways. She can't pay women less in her Senate office and claim that she's for equal pay. She can't say...
Well, we don't know that she did that.
Well, the facts don't bear that out. The facts show that she didn't pay women an equal amount of money in her Senate office. But she also can't talk about these things as if she was a champion and then take money from Saudi Arabia that has a record of abuse of women across the world. The point is, if we stick to the facts, and that's where we want to be, then we're going to be able to make the case to the American people that she has a product that isn't worth buying. And then at the same time, we have to make the case for our own party as well. So it's not just about Hillary. It has to be about both things.
You know, I was looking at the electoral map. You're talking about it. The states that have the most that have been the most solidly Democratic since 1992. The Democrats start off with a huge advantage, about 242 electoral votes. They only need 270 to win. You start off probably in those states with 102 votes, or overall 102 votes. It looks to me like you're starting. You've got a high hill to climb here.
Well, there's no doubt that we have to be about perfect, and the other side can be about good. And so the fact is, we do have a higher burden. But if you just look at the 2012 map or the 2008 map, I think you're right. But if you look at some of the things that we've done at the RNC, some of the things Rand Paul was just talking about, and expanding the map in the black community and the Hispanic community. Cory Gardner all about won the Hispanic vote in Colorado. John Kasich got 28% of the black vote in Ohio. If Mitt Romney would have simply gotten 10 or 12% of the black vote, 37% of the Hispanic vote, he'd be president right now. So we're working on expanding the map, but it means not just showing up once every 4 years, 5 months before the election. It means talking for 2 and 3 years in these communities about things that we have in common before you go in and sell the final product. That's what we're working hard at the RNC. It's not the most exciting topic as far as mechanics, but this is how you win presidential elections, and this is what I'm focused on as chairman of the party.
Let me just go back to these contributions from these foreign countries. What should she do right now? Should she draw the line, say no more contributions? Should she give the money back? What could she do to make that right in your mind?
Well, there's a couple things she should do. Number one, she should abide by the requests of the committee in Congress led by Trey Gowdy to respond to the email request and hand over the server. That's number one. Number two, she should account for all of the money that she received at the Clinton Global Initiative. And then once she gives out forth an accurate accounting, then people like you and others that you're going to have on your show can look through it and figure out whether or not these are things that we need to look into further. We just want her to reveal the facts, that's all.
All right, Wrights Priebus, great to have you this morning, and thank you for joining us.
God bless.
We'll be right back with our panel to get their thoughts on all of this.
At the end of the broadcast, I'm most proud of what we have done as a team. This is the ultimate team sport, television news. And to deliver to the American people the highest quality news broadcast in the world today, that is a very satisfied feeling.
Well, now to break down all these campaign 2016 moves, we turn to our panel. Peggy Noonan, of course, columnist for the Wall Street Journal, a CBS News contributor. John Heilemann is the managing editor of Bloomberg Politics. David Ignatius, columnist for the Washington Post. Susan Page is USA Today's Washington bureau chief. And John Dickerson, our CBS News political director, who's soon going to have a new job. So I got to ask you, John, and you got to know the answers to all in this job. Is Wrights Priebus right when he says in the battleground states that Hillary Clinton is viewed as untrustworthy, and also that she pays her staff, as the senator paid her women workers less than she paid the others?
On the polling question, he is right. There have been some polls that show her unfavorability is up high. CBS has a poll that shows her with a very high unfavorability. Bloomberg also shows that in its recent poll. She's got a lot of work to do. The thing is, she's been getting beaten up pretty hard over the last couple of weeks and hasn't launched a campaign. She's been in the worst possible situation. The Clinton folks used to say during Bill Clinton's campaigns, if you're explaining, you're losing. And she's been on the explaining side and not explaining very well. So today a campaign begins. It's her chance to beat whatever the attacks are against her with an actual campaign that has a message. We'll see where those polls are in about a month after she's had a chance to make that.
And what about this charge he made that she paid her women staffers less than she was paying her men staffers on Capitol Hill? That caught me by surprise, I'll admit that.
I believe that because you can check what the male and female staffers were paid, it's all public record. That can be figured out. I don't know if he's right, but it's something that can be. It's not a mystery. Those numbers are public.
Does anybody else have any? Because I thought that was pretty interesting.
I believe there have been some stories suggesting this in the past.
Yes, there have.
Well, Peggy, let's talk about this. Jeb Bush has a new video out in light of Hillary Clinton entering the campaign. Here's a clip of what he said this morning.
We must do better than the Obama-Clinton foreign policy that has damaged relationships with our allies and emboldened our enemies.
Well, what about this? We're getting ready to have a campaign that a lot of people say is going to be Clinton versus Bush again. Do you think that's how it's going to finally come down?
Oh, I think it might be a year of surprises on the Republican side. Nobody knows how this thing is going to play out. On the Democratic side, we'll see what happens with Mrs. Clinton, whether it's possible anybody could really come forward and challenge her. She is, I think, about to announce just after this show goes off. And man, just realizing how much I wish she was at a big rally with a few thousand people, with a brave speech that tells America what she wants to do and how she wants to do it, what direction we're going to go in. Then she meets with the press. She does 2 days of meeting, from small groups to one-on-ones like this. That would be so powerful for her. Instead, it looks like in about a half an hour, she's going to tweet something out, maybe Facebook something out, and then have some little video. It all feels not like the answer to her problems to me.
What do you think, Susan?
Well, you know, it looks like she's not taking your advice.
Not for the first time.
Clearly, Hillary Clinton doesn't need to do a big rally in order to get our attention, right? We do nothing but pay attention to Hillary Clinton. But I think you're exactly right that she needs to explain why she's running. What's her vision? What is it that where does she want to take the country? And look at one of the big challenges she's going to have in that Jeb Bush clip, where he referred to the Obama-Clinton foreign policy. The degree to which she gets tied to every negative thing about the Obama administration is going to be a big issue for her, and we're going to have to see how she manages it. I hope she ends up doing the press things you talk about, and I hope she ends up talking in a big way about what it is, where she thinks this country should go in the future.
I think that is the key. She has got to keep the campaign looking forward. She's got to keep people looking out of the window at the front of the house, because the back door, that's where I think all this email thing has hurt her. I don't know if she committed a felony or not. But once you open that door to start looking back, then you get into all of the things that people talked about.
A very wise man.
Negatives.
A very wise man who happens to be her husband once said that campaigns are always about the future, and she's going to have to make this campaign about the future and try to make herself look like the future, and that is a tough thing to do given the history, and she's not the youngest woman in the world. But I will say, to your earlier question, Bob, she's going to be the Democratic nominee. In the absence of some new scandal or a health issue, she has no plausible challenger. The party likes her, even though, as John says, if you ask the country, she's got her unfavorabilities are rising and so on. Women, African Americans, Latinos, LGBT voters, the core of the Democratic nominating electorate likes Hillary Clinton. She doesn't have a challenger. She's going to raise a lot of money. She will be the Democratic nominee. Jeb Bush, not nearly as clear that he will be the Republican nominee. And I think, you know, one of the things John mentioned, we have a Bloomberg Politics poll that just came out. We asked a viability question where we went to people and not did a horse race thing, said, would you seriously consider, might consider, never consider? And we asked the country, and then we asked subsets. Among Republicans and independents, 42% said they would never consider voting for Jeb Bush. That was an shocking number to us. Doesn't mean he won't be the nominee, but that is that's a ceiling on his support. That's a large number of people in the Republican electorate who are just they're done with him. They do not want a Bush on the ticket.
They don't.
Let me just ask David and bring him in on this. You know, the whole top of this broadcast, we were talking about this where this deal with the Iranians is right now. Do you see this as impacting on the campaign?
Oh, I think without question it's an issue that will overlie the campaign. It's the most important foreign policy issue of the day, the most important diplomatic negotiation, I would say, of the last few decades. Hillary Clinton's been very careful in what she's said, but the truth is this whole initiative, engagement, began when she was Secretary of State. And so in a sense, she's going to need to take ownership of the process, if not necessarily the result. I think one problem that she has, Peggy and Susan were exactly right in saying she needs to tell the country what she wants. And part of that story is contained in her time as Secretary of State, and Benghazi blunts that. I mean, every time she says, I was Secretary of State and I did that, then up comes Benghazi. There are many areas that she listed in her memoir where she disagreed with President Obama, and she's going to have to make those clear. Egypt, Russia, Syria, so key areas of policy. So, but I do think she's going to have to take foreign policy on Iran and everything else and make it a key issue for her as a former Secretary.
Where do you think we are on this agreement?
Honest
right now?
answer,
Is this thing
Bob,
going to be signed? I mean, after McCain says what he says, I'm not sure you could ever get it through the Congress, right or wrong.
This is an unfinished agreement. McCain is right that there's a significant gap between the fact sheet that we put out and the statement that the Iranians put out. Over the next 3 months, those differences are going to get narrowed, and there are going to be concessions. It's going to be horse trading on both sides. And if we give too many concessions to the Iranians to get the deal, they'll be visible, they'll be obvious to members of Congress, to the public, to us in the news media, and they'll make President Obama very vulnerable. So at this point, if they could sign the deal that they, the fact sheets described, I think that would pass Congress. It's a pretty good deal. We don't have that deal yet.
And of course, the administration, the White House has now acknowledged there's going to be a congressional review of some sort. Now, they hope it's a review and not an approval, right? So they can review it, but they don't have the power to block it, something like the bill that Senator Corker initially outlined. But there was, as Senator Klobuchar said in the interview with you, there was surprise when the framework came out. The progress had been made, that it went further than people expected. If they can deliver that deal, it seems to me that's got a pretty good chance of not being blocked by Congress.
I think part of this story is all of this is the result of the trust that never developed over 6 years between the president and the Congress. This is yet another playing out of, we think we have a good possible deal. Frankly, we are skeptical of you. We don't think you do good deals, and if it were not good, we feel you wouldn't tell us. It is the divide that has reigned for more than 6 years now playing out again.
Peggy, you are not a spokesman for the Republican Party. You were a speechwriter in the Bush and Reagan administrations. But you are a conservative. And I want to talk a little bit about Rand Paul this morning, because can he get the Republican nomination saying, I want to find jobs for these 11 million immigrants that are in the country illegally? As I said to him, if I didn't know, I'd think you were a Democrat on some of the things you said. He is not like the others in the Republican Party.
I agree. He is interesting. He is someone trying to expand the base and get new voices in. He goes out to Northern California, to Berkeley or Palo Alto or something, and got a huge reaction from the young people there. I got to tell you, I listened to it, and I like it. It sounds commonsensical to me. I think John has some information about how Rand Paul comes over with women Republicans that shows you how much work he's got to do. But I'll tell you, a year ago I would have thought he's a little too on the edge for the Republican Party. I listen to him now and I think, that's okay, that's good, that makes sense to me.
Well, follow-up question, what have you got?
Well, again, in our poll, in this viability question, with a very interesting, striking difference between how men and women among Republicans and independents look at Rand Paul. There's 22% of men said they would seriously consider voting for him. Only 11% of women, and that gap between men and women is larger than it is for any other Republican in the field. I think some of that, I don't think that much of that has to do with some of the controversies he's had with various news interviews he's done with various women, because I don't think very many voters in the country know about that. But I do think the libertarian piece of the Republican Party is overwhelmingly male. Ron Paul supporters were overwhelmingly male.
Yes.
There's a lot of young frat boy types who are in that wing of the party. I think the foreign policy thing, though, is the bigger problem for him. And, you think about a Republican Party right now where Jeb Bush caught a huge amount of flack over Jim Baker making statements about, if Jim Baker is too conservative, or is not conservative enough for today's Republican Party, Rand Paul's got a huge problem, because Rand Paul is way more liberal on foreign policy than Jim Baker, and Jim Baker's getting attacked by the neocons in the party, and Jim Baker and Jeb Bush is being attacked for associating with Jim Baker. That's where we are in the Republican Party on foreign policy now.
I think that's exactly right. And if you look at the way Republican candidates are looking at this deal with Iran, they are all saying the United States is operating from a position of weakness. And the response to that is a strong foreign policy. And the next president will be judged on who will be strong. Well, if you look at Rand Paul's position on Iran, it has shifted. In 2007, when he was campaigning for his father, and he was asked about this, and he said, well, when I was campaigning for someone else. When you have to distance yourself from your own father to get away from your previous position, you are not on stable ground. And if it's about who is the strongest, and in 2007, he seemed to suggest that it was okay if Iran got the bomb, that this wasn't worth going, as he said, to war. Now, he has a different position now, but uncertainty on the Iran question is not a great thing, is not a great place to be as a Republican.
He seems more open to this deal than a lot of people in the Republican Party is. He seems pretty open to the possibility that he could sign on to this deal.
Let me ask you all, and David, I want to hear from you too. The first voice out there was Ted Cruz. He obviously is going after the evangelical vote with Iowa coming up. He knows he's got to get in and get part of that from Mike Huckabee, I would assume, out in Iowa. I think what you're going to see him do now is go after the conservative national security vote. He thinks, my understanding is, that he can attack Hillary Clinton on that. He won't have to talk about the other Republicans, and then he can kind of lay out how different he is from them. Does he really have a chance?
Well, it's so early in the campaign, it's hard to forecast the horse race, but he will express that muscular John McCain style republicanism, be tougher, more defense spending, no appeasement. What's interesting about Rand Paul is that he is speaking to a country, including the Republican base, that is pretty suspicious about the use of American military power overseas. When people look at Iraq and Afghanistan, they don't really say, we want more of that. They say we're deeply skeptical about it, and I think that's a kind of wild card in this race. So, you know, Cruz will come back to the traditional muscular themes, beat the table, more of this. But will Rand Paul get some traction saying, well, now wait a minute, is this really in our country's interest?
Isn't this the bad news for Hillary Clinton, though, that because she is such a dominant frontrunner, the presumptive nominee, really, even at this point, before she's formally announced, I mean, she is the only target. For everybody, for Republicans, and she is a spokesman. She's going to define the Democratic Party for the next year. But you look at the Republicans, and they are having a really interesting, fervent debate about what does it mean to be a Republican. And talk about looking ahead. You know, you look at Rubio and Rand Paul and Ted Cruz. They are talking about different visions of what's ahead. That is a good thing for a political party to have.
And we've never had a dynamic like this. It's going possibly to be boring versus bloody, dynamic and full of people hitting each other over the head, or something that may look stable but may look entitled.
All right. Well, we have to end it there. I want to thank all of you very much, and we'll be back in a minute.
And I think that Peggy has something.
We were all
talking.
We were. Oh, I think well, you're not allowed to this time. We're going to overrule you. We were all talking in the green room about what a privilege it is and has been to work for you. You have had one of the epic careers in broadcast journalism. We have all watched it. John said you taught us how it's done. It was a real privilege to work with such an old school gentleman and cool guy. Well, so thank you.
My goodness.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we will be back in just a minute after that. Well, that's it for us today. We want to thank you again for watching Face the Nation, and we'll see you right here next Sunday.